Hi, I'm Tamara, and welcome to Many Roads Traveled. So, if you like a crazy adventure, travel adventures, then please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a step along this 30,000-mile road trip I did from Paris to Cape Town and back up to Nairobi. Okay, so welcome. It's episode 21. And on today's episode, we are still in Ethiopia, having some crazy times. And we'll mostly be in Gondar, Ethiopia in this episode. And we'll be picking up where we left off last week, as some of you might have already listened or watched. I'm lucky to be alive, really, after the fatal truck accident I was in the Simien Mountains, which is not great. So if you missed that episode, definitely catch that one. Okay, and we're only going to be covering maybe 100 miles on this trip, which will take us up to 11,400 miles of the 30,000-mile journey. Okay, and before I continue with my journey in Ethiopia, I just would like to express my concerns and well wishes that the situation in Ethiopia right now gets resolved, because it's looking like there could be a full-on civil war, really, between the Ethiopian federal government and Tigray National Liberation Party. Ethiopia kind of has certain, I don't know if they're states or counties, I don't know what they're called, to be honest, but they kind of have some semi-independence from the federal government. But I guess the Tigray National Liberation Party is cross the line, basically. And sadly, I mean, they don't even know, but there could be hundreds of thousands of local people already been killed. And they're expecting possibly up to 200,000 refugees entering Sudan because of this. So, and today's news is not looking good. So, yeah, my thoughts go out to Ethiopia, and I hope this can be resolved peacefully, since the Prime Minister did win the Nobel Peace Prize last year. So, hopefully it can be resolved peacefully between them. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. So it's day 124, and Casey and I, so Casey's my friend that I'm still traveling with, who I left Canada with, and we met two guys when we arrived in Gondar at the bus station called Daniel and Inishot. So we met for breakfast with Daniel in the morning of the day 124. Now, I kind of didn't have a great feeling about Daniel. I thought he was a bit dodgy, and I don't know, just my gut instinct. Casey really liked him. So anyways, we had breakfast with him. And then he took us to this old church, which is called Bahar Selassie Church, and it's from the 18th century. It's a monastery, and it was amazing, actually. And like the outer walls are made of stone, and then the actual church is like made of mud walls from the 18th century. It's still there, and it has a straw thatched roof. And then you go inside, and there's all these like very vivid paintings on cotton that are on all the inner walls. And when I was there was still a nun and two monks that lived there, and 3 of the 11 towers that are there, like in the grounds. So it's a very sweet, enchanting place, actually. And it's one of the things to see when you go to Gondar, Ethiopia. So, to mark the occasion, we enjoyed sitting on the monastery wall. Getting some Rasta vibes there too. And Casey was rather hungover from the night before, because he continued partying with Daniel in one of the Tej houses. Now, Ethiopia, they love their Tej. Now, Tej is like a alcoholic honey mead, and it's actually quite good. And the Tej houses are just people's houses, really, and they put flags in front of their house if they are open for business. So you just sit in their front room and they bring it out to you. And, there's a couple couches and tunes going. It's a unique experience for sure. Spent a lot of time at Tej houses in Ethiopia. So we just basically went back and had a nap, and it was just nice to just take it easy for a couple days after some very hard traveling, of course, truck accidents. So that was nice. So later on, we went out for dinner. I still was not vibing injera and wat. Injera is the local, both local dishes, but injera is the Ethiopian bread, which is made from teff, which is a grain, like it's gluten-free grain that is grown in the Ethiopian mountains. And traditionally how it's made is, and it's very big. It's like a huge pancake, it almost looks like, but with lots of holes in it. And then it's quite gray in color. And traditionally they make it by putting it under rocks in the sun and leave it for 3 days. So it's very sour as well. Not my bag, really. And then wat is kind of like a usually quite spicy, thin stew that can be vegetable or chicken or mutton. I just stuck to spaghetti, to be honest, because that area used to be an Italian colony, Eritrea, and so a lot of the Italian food kind of drifted down to Ethiopia as well. So yeah, usually my diet was eggs for breakfast and spaghetti for dinner. So that night in the Tej house, I met 4 doctors. So I was chatting to them, and they were telling me how difficult it was to get into medical school, let alone graduate. So I think they have something like 150,000 applicants every year, and maybe 50 get in and then graduate, because the government pays for their school, but then you have to work for the government for 2 years, and then you're kind of free to do what you want. But if you remain in Ethiopia as a doctor, this was back in 1993, but I can't imagine things have changed too much, really. And they only made $2,000 a year as a full-time doctor, which is crazy. But yeah, so they're really nice. It was nice talking to them. So next day, we went with Indisho, the other guy we met at the bus station, to go see the royal enclosure. And so there's like lots of castles there and some baths. But on our way, we met 2 Aussie guys, Mike and Tony, and we hadn't met any other travelers for weeks now. So I was like, oh my gosh. So we ended up talking to them in the street for ages, and they were like, nah, we heard the royal enclosure isn't too much. So, let's just go for a coffee and chat kind of thing. So we ended up doing that. So we never went to the royal enclosure. And then later on, I went and finally got hold of my mom, called my mom, because I hadn't talked to her for like, I don't know, at least 2 months. So the first minute was her just yelling at me, like, where the hell have you been? Oh my God, I'm so worried, blah, 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 blah. I was like, okay, yep, I'm okay. I didn't tell her about the truck accident. No need to worry her about that at the time. But it was nice. Got to speak to my little brother and my mom for about 25 minutes. And it was just good to hear from them. And everyone was okay at home. So that was really good. Because, like I said, back in 1993, there's really no internet. You could just Facebook someone and I tried to call her several times from different countries and just for whatever reason couldn't get through, or she wasn't home or whatever. So yeah, finally got to speak to her. Mike and Tony had told us about this guy on this street corner selling American government Desert Storm food, like these thermopacks. And they're like, they're really, really good. And, as I said about my diet in Ethiopia. So I was like, oh, okay, cool. So went with them to see this guy. And yeah, he just had these like big boxes of these gray thermopacks surrounded him. And it was six packs for $1. And it was like they had peanut butter and cheese spread and chicken a la king and potato gratin and chicken stew. So I was like, oh my God. So I ended up buying 2 of each of those. I mean, they had other ones, but I don't eat red meat. So yeah, bought 2 of those to check them out. And yes, they were really good. And it was a nice change to finally get something different than eggs and spaghetti after weeks of that. So after dinner, we went back to another Tej house with Mike and Tony. And again, it was nice talking to different people because, Casey and I was getting a bit much. Just 24/7 with one person. And we've been together almost 4 months now. And yeah, so Mike and Tony had been in Africa for a year and a half at that point. So they were telling me all about down south. And they're like, listen, once you get out of Ethiopia, it's smooth sailing. Like Kenya, pretty much all the south is really nice. There's a lot more travelers because back then, even probably now, it's the same. The traveling grapevine was kind of from Nairobi down to Harare, Zimbabwe, or South Africa. So that's kind of where most people were: Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zim, and South Africa. They're like, but South Ethiopia, it's still pretty rough, because they were experiencing what I was experiencing too. And to this day, out of my 76 countries, Ethiopia was the hardest for me to, I don't want to say judge, but to get a feel for the people, because so far we've had amazing experiences with local people in every country. Egypt had some, sexual kind of verbal, well, a couple physical too, but harassment. But besides that, it was smooth sailing. We got invited to homes, and people. It was super nice. But Ethiopia, it was like half the people hated you just because you're a foreigner, not because you're white, not because of anything else, just because you're not Ethiopian. And then the other half really liked you and would buy you like a banana or a cup of tea or something, like really sweet. But you didn't know who was who until you were literally up, face to face with them. And it was getting a bit much, because I especially if I was walking by myself, I'd already been given the nickname Tiger or Tiger Lady, because I'd be standing somewhere and teenagers or kids or even adults would like throw rocks at me or throw sticks at me, or they would surround you and stare at you and then bark at you, or I don't know, it's just really bizarre. And yeah, I always had my guard up in Ethiopia. I never really felt super safe there, and I didn't trust anyone, to be honest. And I remember, looking at my journal from that time, I actually wrote, I was like, I've never felt so alone in my life, because it was the first time I hadn't had my friends around me. I mean, Casey and I, all things considering, we're getting along really well, but we weren't particularly close, and we did clash on a lot of our ideas. And I actually wrote, I'll be surprised if Casey and I make it together to Cape Town, to South Africa, which proved out to be true. And that was what I was starting to have a problem with Casey trusting Daniel, because I just knew he was a dodgy man. Next day, so it's day 126. It had rained almost every day for over a week now, so that wasn't super great. So I went to the market to try and buy they had some really cool like black onyx crosses. So I thought those would be quite good gifts, or, one for myself or a necklace, something like that. So yeah, Casey came with me. So we went to this market and I was looking, didn't really see anything fancy, and the market's quite packed and lots of people had, radios on and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, I mean, we didn't find out the time, but I guess over the radio came an announcement saying that in Somalia, which is the next country over, 3 or 4 Western journalists had been stoned to death in the streets in Somalia, like that day. Next thing you know, like the vibe where we were in the market just soured. Like it got super aggressive. And I remember looking up, and the next thing, like we're surrounded by probably 100, 150 people just like staring at us, but getting like aggressively, basically. And of course, Casey was oblivious to it. So I kind of grabbed his hand and I was like, look up. And he was like, holy shit. And I was like, yeah. He's like, what do we do? I'm like, well, listen, just look everyone in the eye and just follow me. Like we're walking. We just walk through them. And we had like, so that's what we did. We just looked everyone in the eye, kept walking. I mean, I had to, shoulder my way through that crowd, but just didn't, I was like, just fake it. It's kind of like alpha A, the alpha animal, like just fake it. Like you're tough and strong and just keep walking, which is what we did, and just got back to the hotel. And I was like, I'm not going out for the rest of the day. It's Desert Storm Day. I've got my Desert Storm food and my little stove. So I'm just not dealing with this crap anymore. It's ridiculous. So we just basically stayed in for the day, and it was just like, I want to get the hell out of Ethiopia ASAP, to be honest. So day 127, we went to try and get bus tickets to a town near Lalibela. But he, instead of him going, he gave Daniel $40, which wasn't nearly that much. I think he only had like maybe a 500 beer note. I don't know. Just gave him way too much money. And Daniel said he would get the bus tickets for us. And I just thought, I actually didn't know at the time. Because, yeah, wouldn't have impressed. But of course, he had to tell me eventually. So I was like, okay, well, hope your buddy comes through. Fingers crossed, kind of thing. I mean, surprisingly, he did get the tickets, like about after an hour or so. But of course, no change. And the tickets were probably only about $3 or $4 each. So, yeah, I don't think there was $10 for the tickets, both tickets. So, yeah, so no change. So I was like, well, Case, don't want to say it, but I told you so. Anyway, so I just ended up staying in the hotel. I did some repairs on my backpack because I did get a few, tears or something like that after the truck accident. So I stitched my backpack up, just chilling out in the room, and then went for our usual spaghetti dinner at night. And then we were to meet Daniel at one of the Tej houses to get the change back. Well, of course, Daniel's there. He's pissed out of his head. Like, he's drunk, hammered. And he's like, oh, yeah, Casey, I'll go get your money now. I'll be back in 15 minutes. We didn't see him again for the rest of the night. I was like, Casey, he's probably just drunk your change, to be honest. So I think we might have had just one Tej. We went back because we were planning on leaving the next morning, so didn't have a late one. Went back to the hotel, waited for Daniel for a couple hours. Casey's like, right, this is ridiculous. I'm going to go out and look for him. So I was like, fine, knock yourself out. So he went, looked for him for an hour or so, to no avail, of course. No sign of Daniel. So the next day, which was also our 4-month anniversary of traveling, day 128, we're up at 5:15 in the morning to get this bus. But then Casey's like, well, no, I'm not leaving without my change. Like between $20 or $30. He's like, no, I'm not leaving before I get my change back from Daniel. So I don't know if he gave him more money, because I'm like, it's only $20, but he was adamant not leaving. So I have a feeling he gave him more money to buy something else, and he just didn't tell me. But I don't know. I'll have to ask him that next time. So I'm like, oh my God, Case. So he refunded his bus ticket right there. And I was like, well, I'm just going to try to see if I can exchange mine. So I held on to mine. And then we just ended up going back to the hotel, rebooking in again, and back to sleep. So Casey went out to find Daniel, and he did finally. And then Daniel was like, oh, well, after I left you guys at the Tej house, I got thrown in jail for 4 hours. And then when I got out, I just went back to the Tej house and got more drunk and just forgot about your change. Sorry, mate. And I'm like, whatever. And then Daniel says, oh, well, with your change, I bought a silver cross, and I was going to sell that to a tourist and make some profit off of it, and then give you that money instead of his change back, kind of thing. He's like, but, then, and like I said, we'd only seen 2 other travelers in weeks. And they were Mike and Tony, and it wasn't them. And of course he's like, well, and the tourist changed his mind, so he didn't buy it. So now I'm going to have to take the silver cross back to where the guy bought it from and get your money back that way. Ridiculous. So I went back to the bus station to see if I can change my ticket. And I was like, Casey, this is crazy. We got to get the hell out of here. But anyways, on my way, at the bus station, I met this really lovely Italian doctor, Giorgio. And I ended up talking to him for ages. He was so nice. And then he invited us to his hotel for dinner that night. I was like, yeah, sounds super great. So I told him where we were staying in our cheap, dingy hotel. And he's like, okay, well, I'll come and pick you up at like 7 o'clock. We're like, okay, great, super. So yeah, so about 7-ish that night, Giorgio and his wife, Piera, and their two daughters, Catalina and Ghana. They came and picked us up in their posh Range Rover and took us to their hotel, which is probably the best hotel in Gondar. It was lovely, actually, and had a beautiful view of the city. So yeah, we had some beers with them and talked to them. And then Giorgio was like, well, listen, I might be able to get you guys a ride from Addis Ababa to Moyale, which is on the Kenyan border, with a friend of mine. So he gave me his cards with his phone number and his address in Addis Ababa. And he's like, just give me a call when you get to Addis Ababa and I'll see what I can do. was like, let's be super great. And he was, yeah, he had a very good job. I think he worked for the Italian government, organizing all of, the head doctor or something like that of the in Ethiopia. Anyway, so it was very nice talking to them. Go back to our hotel, and then so the next day, so we've been in Gondar 5 days now, right? I haven't really seen anything except for that church. So instead of getting up early to try and get a bus out of here, because Casey still hasn't got his money back from Daniel, remember? So he feigns he's sleeping in, so we don't have to get the bus that day. I was like, that's it, Case. I'm leaving tomorrow with or without you. I don't care, because this is ridiculous. And that's what I mean. I only thought it was for $20, and that's why I think there must have been something else to it. I mean, luckily, I had my Desert Storm food, so I was only spending maybe $3 or $4 a day for my accommodation. So at least I wasn't spending money for this ridiculousness of Casey's idiot moves. I mean, still love you, Case, but you even admitted to me you were an idiot. So during this time. So I finally found a couple guys to buy my bus ticket, because I still had my bus ticket to go to this other town, which we weren't even going to go to anymore, because we'd found out that because of all the rain that we couldn't get to Lalibela, which is where these rock-strewn old, like 800-year-old churches are. And because the flights couldn't even fly, like land at the airport there, and the roads were impassable. So that's why we had to change our mind. So anyway, so I got rid of these tickets, luckily for the same price I paid them. So at least that was something. So then we decided we were going to go to Bahar Dir instead, which is on the Lake Tana coastline, which is the source of the Blue Nile Falls. Because, I mean, we'd already followed the Nile all the way down through Egypt and Sudan until where it splits in Khartoum, and it splits into the Blue Nile Falls, which is in Ethiopia, and then the White Nile Falls, which goes all the way down to Uganda. So we're like, okay, so at least we have a plan. We're going to go to Bahar Dir instead, although it sucked that we didn't get to go to Lalibela, but hey-ho. And I'd also run into Mike and Tony, and they'd wanted to get the boat down to Lake Tana, but I guess it was only for locals, and the Ferengi price was like 150 beer an hour. And at the time, it was about, well, you got between 5 and 7 beer to the $1. So that was ridiculous. So they're like, so we'll probably try and get on the bus that you get on to Bahar Dir and come with you. We're like, okay, that'd be awesome. So, of course, we're trying to get bus tickets for Bahar Dir, and no, sold out. Like, we couldn't get bus tickets anywhere, but they said, well, maybe in the morning come back and you might be able to get 2 tickets. I want to get the hell out of Gondar, because remember, I'm still being, anytime I go out, I've got kids, throwing rocks at me and sticks or whatever. Chased a couple more kids. Got Tiger Lady still prowling the streets of Gondar. Just kind of went back to the hotel room, chilled out, wrote some probably more letters, and then met the boys, Mike and Tony, at Tej's house. As I was leaving, so we're there for a bit, and again, once I was leaving there, some kid just comes up and kicks me in the shins and then takes off. So I chased him. I never really caught these people, but I thought I'd just give it a go anyways. It might put them off, but it did seem to put them off anyways. Also, earlier that day, I'd stocked up on my Desert Storm food. So I ended up buying 36 different packs of them because they're 6 for $1. I mean, my backpack weighed a ton. I don't even know how I got everything in there because it was pretty full already. So I think my backpack now weighed about 22 kilos. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so next day, day 130, Casey finally gets his money back from Daniel. And we had gone to the bus station after that, and we did manage to get 2 bus tickets to a nearby town of Bahar Dir, which was a lovely ride. The lady next to me was just puking the whole journey. So that was great. And then once we got to this little town, we managed to get on the same bus that Tony and Mike were on to Bahar Dir, because they got on, straight from Gondar. So that was nice. And then, so the 4 of us bought some chut, and chut is this plant that you chew the leaves of, and you kind of get a buzz off of it, kind of like a speedy buzz. But I had tried it before and I didn't really like it, but I guess the locals on the bus were showing, like, they're like, oh, no, you're eating the wrong leaves, or you're eating too much of the bad stuff. You need to just eat the good stuff, which are the smaller leaves, which have a reddish tinge to them. So I was like, okay, and you do not swallow it either. So you have an empty Pepsi bottle and you spit not. So once I did that, I did actually get a little bit of a buzz. So at least that was something. And then we got into Bahar Dir around 2 p.m. And again, it was just like, I just didn't understand it. Like, I didn't know why local people treated you like shit half the time. Because again, we got off the bus. Next thing you know, we're surrounded. People are barking at us. They're like throwing some sticks at us and rocks. And, you know, now there's 4 of us and 3 of them are guys at least. But no, didn't stop them. It was just like, it was just so crazy. Like I said, I've never experienced anything since. And that was definitely the first time I experienced that before. I was just like, what the bleep? So anyways, we found a cheap hotel, got some dinner, probably my spaghetti as usual. And then, you know, found a new Tej house, had a couple hours there. But like I said, local people they were even worse when they're drunk. And this one guy was really harassing me and he kept falling into me like on purpose. But like, oh my, I had enough. So I literally just took him by his the front of his shirt and just nailed him against this wall. And I was like threatening to punch him. I was like, if you don't leave me alone, I am going to punch your lights out for real. Like, piss off. Oh my God. And also the return of the bed bugs. Well, I don't know if they ever left, to be honest, but that night particularly, I was just eaten alive again. And my bed bugs from before, some of them were starting to get infected with my blood illness. That is no go. That's just not good at all because they could turn into septicemia like that. So I did not want that to happen, obviously, in the middle of. So that pretty much, the only good thing was that we were at a Gondar after almost a week. But that's it for this episode, I'm afraid, because you're going to have to turn into next week's episode to hear about, well, Blue Nile Falls. That was nice. But then one of the worst 2-day bus journeys of my life to Addis Ababa, and another potentially very violent, if not fatal, incident in Addis Ababa as well. So make sure you tune into next Thursday's episode. You don't want to miss it. Now, of course, it is time for Tam's top tips. So, tip number 1, if you do go to Gondar, I mean, I've seen people's Facebook groups and stuff like that. They had an amazing time in Ethiopia. So, I think the friendly thing is still there, like what I've seen and read on blogs and stuff, like other blogs that people have been more recently. You know, there is still that aspect to it, but maybe it's a little bit better. But if you do, so tip number 1, if you do go to Gondar, then yeah, go to that church I talked about that I went to, which was called Debrahn Selassie Church. And it's about $7 entry now. I don't think we had to pay anything back then, but it's about $7 now. And then you can also go to, the royal enclosure with all the castles and some baths there as well. I think they're called the Facilite baths. They are, so that whole enclosure, that's about $7 as well. And it's about a 2 to 3 day bus journey from Addis Ababa to Gondar, which that'll be next episode, going the other way. So it's $7 each way. Okay, and then tip number 2 would be, if you can, go to Lalibela. That's kind of one of my, well, I wouldn't say regrets, but it's something I wish I would have been able to see when we were there, because I'm not going back to Ethiopia. I'll tell you that right now. Although it is a beautiful country, I will say that. And there are lots of cool things to see there. If you want to go to Lalibela, which is a UNESCO heritage site, and like I said, they're 800 years old, and there's 11 monolithic churches that are carved out of the stone, the mountains kind of thing. So yeah, it looks amazing. So it's $50 US dollars for that, covers you for up to 5 days. And if you want to get there from Addis Ababa, then it's about I think that's also another 2 or 3 day bus journey, which is about $5 to $10 for the bus each way. But you can also fly there for about $80 US dollars. And if you wanted a guide, it's about $20 to $30 a day. tip number 3 is don't give local people money like as in to do that stuff for you. Just do it yourself, please. And also do expect that you will pay probably 3 times the price as locals, the Ferengi price, which means foreigner, on everything basically. So just expect that, and so you won't be super surprised when that happens, because it will happen, and it still is happening this day. And then my tip for solo female travelers is basically don't take any shit. Become your own tiger lady if you must. But most of it, I guess now it is more like it's a patriarchal system, so maybe more verbal stuff, but just stand up for yourself, basically. So yeah, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss, step along the way. And if this is your first episode, yeah, go back to episode 1 and come with me on the whole journey. And as always, head over to my website, manyroadstravel.com. Okay, so that's a wrap, I believe. And yeah, hit that notification bell. Okay, until next Thursday, safe travels, one road at a time.